Well, let's start with the United States because I think that defines for Russia the space within which they can maneuver. The United States is currently in the grip of three interwoven huge challenges. There's, of course, an election campaign that's going to heat up and in all likelihood will get nastier and nastier as we go nearer to November. There is the Chinese dilemma, how far to take the feud with Beijing, not only over the origins of the Wuhan virus, but also on trade, on dominance in the South China Sea, etc., etc. This is becoming very central, even with the visit of Secretary of State Pompeo in Israel. We come across the demand for to be attentive to American tensions with China. And of course, the struggle against the virus itself, which is still taking a huge toll in life and livelihood in America. And it's rational to expect that attention will be drawn away from our region. And we've seen some signs of that. But the other side of the story, of course, is that if the United States still aspires to global leadership, and it does, and it's still politically important to come across as being internationally influential. And particularly if there is a Chinese challenge to be answered, then the Eastern Mediterranean matters. Eastern Mediterranean matters because it is one of the terminal elements of the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI, the Yidai Yilu of President Xi, and it is very important in this respect. It's important because it could be the source of destabilization, and it is also important because for the United States, and particularly for the Trump administration, Israel is an important player also in terms of its domestic impact. So all of this means that the United States is not going away, and in certain aspects, whether it is the confrontation with Iran or pushing forward with the Trump plan in the Israeli-Palestinian context, paying attention to the need for stability in Egypt, and increased attention to the challenges that Turkey is posing in Libya and in the question of Cyprus, obviously. In all of these respects, the United States is not going away. But it is facing the difficulty of translating its historical role into the new tools of managing new kinds of conflict in the region. And above all, the question of whether or not the ambitions of Turkey can be contained, because we are in the midst of a major challenge with Europe. Of all, European military action sounds almost like an oxymoron. But European operations under Irini, etc., all of these are linked to the bid by Erdogan, perhaps because he had come face to face with serious domestic trouble in the summer of 2019. He has escalated in Syria. He has pushed forward in the situation. Again, he's rumbling about nuclear weapons to some extent, and he's certainly turned the civil war in Libya into a proxy war of the first order. And in the middle of all of this, will America make up its mind that whether or not they like Khalifa Haftar, and I can see why some people would not be enamored with this man, nevertheless, it has to act so as to check, to contain, to push back against Erdogan's adventurism. Because if they do not, they would leave ample space for Russia to use the present situation, to use the crisis, the absence of sufficient American attention to stabilize their own position in the Eastern Mediterranean. This is not everything that the Russians do is necessarily bad or dangerous. They are, I would say, from my perspective, on the right side on the Libyan divide. But having said so, I would prefer to see the United States acting in concert with Western Europe, laying down the rules, bringing about stabilization in the Eastern Mediterranean rather than leaving this to Russia. So while all of us understand that the pandemic is uppermost in the minds and the agendas and the daily work of leaders in both Washington and the key European capitals, I think that there's enough in the Eastern Mediterranean to require their attention. Well, clearly we are all going to be strained to some extent for resources. All of our economies suffered, some more than others. I can assume that our two friends in the Eastern Mediterranean, Greece and Cyprus, have suffered grievous loss in terms of tourism industry and also our investment, Cyprus, Greece, to a lesser extent, certainly Egypt and Israel, in our energy exploitation in the Eastern Mediterranean is now in doubt because the energy price at the bottom has dropped from under energy prices the world over, and that certainly puts our plans, for example, for a pipeline probably off for a number of, possibly for a number of years, possibly forever. It's a bit difficult to predict. And our ability to find the necessary budgets to build up our military capacities facing challenges from all directions, terrorism, adventurism, and of course, in our case, the Iranian danger, the Iranian challenge, there will be limits on our resources. But in my mind, at least, what this should mean is that we should do more together. We should do more to pool our resources, to work in closer coordination, closer cooperation, and also use our leverage in Washington and elsewhere to mobilize support for what I think are the common goals of basically the entire range of the EMGF countries. Italy, Greece, Cyprus, Egypt, Israel, and Jordan. And we shall see, of course, whether we can sustain our cooperation with the Palestinian Authority against the background of the argument that's about to break over the future of the Trump plan. But that's a very minor issue right now. The key question is cooperation between what I would call the 3+3 and our ability to bring other like-minded players into the game. The fact that Iran has faltered badly, both economically and in terms of the direct management of the the COVID-19 crisis, may give us some hope that Islamist terrorism supported by the Iranians will suffer the loss of their capacity to sponsor such activities. We see this already in Iraq with the prime minister, who's definitely no friend of Iran. We see this in Lebanon, where the people are rising against what Hezbollah has done to the country, both in terms of its international isolation and in terms of what happened to the economy. I hope the ceasefire in Yemen holds. It certainly limits the ability of Iran to pose a threat. So maybe we are going to see change in that front. Whether also Turkey's interest and ability to support Islamist elements in the Tripoli GNA government and so on in northern Syria will also be curtailed by the needs that the crisis has generated. I think we have to wait and see. We definitely have to make sure that the costs of such behavior remain high.